Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. His name is Kit Klarenberg. Last name is spelled Klarenberg. And if you listen to my show, you might have listened to a show we did 3 years ago on MK Ultra at Guantanamo. So I reposted that on my podcast so people can check that out. And I re-streamed everything to Rockfin, Rumble, and X, where I haven't been censored yet or kicked off or demonetized or whatever. The
not yet.
Yeah,
not
really.
yet.
It's just a matter of time. So anyway, and some of my shows do disappear. Like I was going through my archive and I'm like, why isn't this up here? Like it just got mysteriously taken down from some of my podcasts. Anyway, I came to my attention. He wrote this article. I did something about this guy, Nikita Kasap. People who listen to my show, if you're not aware, this was a guy who was supposedly going to try to assassinate Trump. He came out of Waukesha, Wisconsin, and the reason it caught my interest also because I've been following the assassins, these mysterious guys who fly around a lot of things. Mangione and Ralph, who went to Ukraine. But this one was interesting too because the tie to the O9A, and I wrote my book Global Death Cult in 2021. And I saw some of these terms that are very specific to the O9A, but I didn't see this kind of perspective that Kit had on this whole thing. I didn't understand the kind of intel aspects of it until I read his article. So if you see this on Rockfin X or Rumble, you'll see the title, Did Ukrainian Intel Attempt Trump Assassination? And he has much more context than I did, so I'm glad to have him back. So Kit Klarenberg, welcome back to the show.
It's a pleasure, William. Thanks for having me on.
So for people who didn't hear our last show, maybe you can just do a follow-up, what you've been up to, and then what led up to publishing this article on April 22nd, 2025.
Well, I mean, I've been focused heavily. I write about a lot of things for a lot of places, but I've been very heavily focused on the proxy war in Ukraine. In particular, the British sponsorship of the Ukrainian far right, of which they are few in number, but have a massively outsized influence in the Ukrainian military, politics, and society, and they are joined at the hip to British intelligence. And in recent weeks, we've had a number of disclosures in the mainstream media kind of confirming everything that I've been reporting on since the war started, in effect, that it is the British, which rather than the Americans, that are the quote unquote brains of the proxy war. The Americans are providing the practical support, they're providing the money, they're providing the weapons, but Britain is masterminding, if you can even call it that, Ukrainian military operations, and is explicitly seeking to escalate the conflict into all-out kind of hot war with Russia. And this is a long-standing objective of British intelligence, using Ukraine as a beachhead. Now, it does appear that we're kind of reaching the end of the road on that, with the Trump administration seemingly losing interest in keeping this going. We've had a number of public statements by people like Marco Rubio and Trump himself, which suggests that they're just rather sick of this and want it over and done with. I mean, God knows what they're saying behind closed doors. But I think that the subject of the show, and then the subject of my piece, it really jumped out to me because we have had a number of attempted assassinations of Trump, but not only that, there in May 2024 there was an attempt to murder the Prime Minister of Slovakia, which is it's a small Central European country which is led by an individual called Robert Fico, who is he was elected on a very popular anti-war, anti-sanction program. And he ended Slovakia's support for the proxy war, which had previously been quite extensive, including giving Ukraine all of its Soviet-era MiG fighter jets. But he ended all of that and has ended sanctions on Russia, and has been calling for an end to the conflict. He was shot multiple times and is lucky to have lived by a hardcore Ukrainian supporter, and questions abound as to whether this individual had international connections and was perhaps directed by certain elements outside Slovakia to do what he did. Now, the case of Nikita Kasap came to my attention because the mainstream media gave this case blanket coverage. As you say, this is a teenager from rural Wisconsin who is accused of murdering his mother and stepfather in order to finance a scheme to assassinate US President Donald Trump, and therefore instigate a nationwide race war. And this is clear that he is possessed of neo-Nazi satanic inclinations ideologically. And I mean, one thing, the thing that jumped out to me the most when I did the most meager digging into his background, and also read the contents of a publicly available FBI affidavit relating to the investigation of his parents' murder and his apprehension and the investigation into him. And there were all of these details which struck me as so suspicious, which the entire mainstream media, which, as I say, has given this blanket coverage, neglected to mention or sought to diminish and bury. And you can find reports in the New York Times, the Guardian, all of these major legacy media outlets, which delve very extensively into Nikita Kasap's background, his potential motivations for trying to kill the president. There were psychological profiles published, extensive timelines of the police and FBI investigations into his parents' deaths and himself. And they neglect to mention the most striking aspects of this FBI affidavit, which is that he was quite clearly being directed in his actions by people unknown via Telegram, a messaging app, with Ukrainian telephone numbers. Now, it is quite clear from these exchanges that he had, which are quoted at some length in the affidavit, that, I mean, yes, he was being told how to respond to his stepfather being texted, because after Nikita murdered his stepfather, his stepfather's employer was texting him for weeks afterwards saying, "Where are you?" And Nikita, at the direction of these Ukrainian Telegram users, was responding using his stepfather's telephone, saying, "Oh, I got sick and that's why I'm not appearing." It's also very clear that he expected, once he killed Donald Trump, to be extracted to Kiev, and he was asking, will I be able to live a normal life there? Will I be able to get a job? Blah, blah, which does tend to suggest that this wasn't, a bunch of random individuals who he was conspiring with, but this had kind of state sanction. It's like going into a witness protection program, albeit in a foreign country. Now, one of these users, in response to a question Nikita posed about what country do you think will get the blame for this, they stated, very plainly, Russia will be blamed for it. This is the goal. Okay, so that's very, very suspicious. Now, also as well, there was. He apparently made no secret of what he was planning to do, and the affidavit contains a précis of an interview with a classmate of Nikita's, who stated that Nikita was openly stating that he was going to kill Donald Trump, and was in contact with individuals in Russia about this, and he was planning to overthrow the government. Now, I mean, there are, as I mentioned in my piece, that there are kind of ominous echoes with the legend building that of Lee Harvey Oswald that preceded the assassination of John F. Kennedy in November 1963, where there were all of these incidents which seem custom built to frame Oswald in advance as this unhinged communist and crack marksman, this kind of embittered ex-Marine with an axe to grind against the president. And you know, it seems that Kassap was, you know, very similarly laying the foundations with his immediate associates that well, I'm going to kill the president, and Russia is directing me to do this. So I mean that's suspicious in itself. But again, when you really like dig into the details of this affidavit, you know, he was getting being provided with extensive information on how to use a drone as an attack drone and how to affix poison or explosives to drones to take out Trump, and was seemingly financing this and taking directions on how to do so. You know, drones have been extensively used by Ukraine in its war with Russia. They have been openly referred to as Kiev's weapon of choice, which is, you know, a kind of a linkage of sorts, you know. But there's also another element of this, which even people who have the very few independent journalists who have focused on the Ukrainian aspect of this seem to have missed, which is the SBU has an extensive history in recent years of recruiting individuals in Russia to commit crimes via Telegram. And, you know, they get offered token sums of money to, say, vandalize a Russian Ministry of Defense building. Or they get blackmailed. So someone gets scammed out of their money by a Ukrainian scammer, and they get told, well, you know, if you throw a Molotov cocktail at a police station or vandalize a polling booth, then you can get your money back. And it has been confirmed that there were numerous incidents during Russia's March 2024 presidential election in which people poured dye and ink into ballot boxes or just vandalized polling stations, and they had been put up to it by the SBU. So this fits rather neatly into what Kassap was doing, and indeed his contacts with people unknown in Ukraine. It's also clear that he thought that there were going to be other attacks.
Right. He was one of 10, right? He's one of 10.
Yeah. Supposedly, yes. And it's like, I mean, we must ask ourselves, well, was this a way of motivating him? You know, it's like, you know, you're not alone here. There's going to be other acts of mayhem. So there's that aspect to it. But then, you know, when you delve into his political views, which are, you know, to say the least, pretty questionable, if not outright perverse. You know, he was, as you mentioned, a follower of the teachings of the Order of Nine Angles, which is this satanic neo-Nazi group, and advocates extremist violence to destroy modern civilization due to Judeo-Christian influence, i.e., you know, Jews run the world. He wrote a manifesto at the request of his handlers that he sent over to them, which echoes the Order of Nine Angles messaging and ideology almost precisely. And he states in it that it is clear Jews control all white countries and promote degeneracy, and for the white race to survive, it is necessary to accelerate the collapse of Western countries and Western civilization. You know, so I mean that is you know, an interesting data point which the mainstream media has taken some interest in, but kind of glossed over as an example of perhaps his you know, his impaired mental state, rather than indications that he had particular connections overseas. Because in aforementioned manifesto, he talks about Atomwaffen, which this is a now defunct US neo-Nazi fraternity that was committed to carrying out extremist violence in, again, in service of fomenting race war. He states in his manifesto, there is a lot to learn from the successes and mistakes of Atomwaffen. Atomwaffen has had open and very intimate ties with the openly neo-Nazi US-funded and armed Azov regiment. The Azov hosted members of Atomwaffen in Ukraine. The Atomwaffen members attended a annual neo-Nazi black metal festival in Kiev, which is convened in a state-owned venue and features, influential Azov activists giving speeches on stage. Now, I might add that what might account for the media blackout on Katsap's evident Ukrainian ties is that when the founder of Atomwaffen is individual.
Yeah, it's Brandon Clint Russell. Yeah. Just sorry to interrupt, but he was just, to my knowledge, I didn't know this, but in February, he was just found convicted in 2025 of his attempt with Clendenin, the Bonnie and Clyde of the farthest far right.
His girlfriend.
They were plotting to destroy the electrical grid of Baltimore, which is, I guess, 70% African American. So they're going. He's going back.
It's interesting that you found that at all, because as I note in my article, Brandon Clint Russell and his girlfriend, they were indicted in February 23. So that's more than 2 years before their prosecution. Before their conviction. They were planning to deprive Baltimore, Maryland, of heat and light during winter by destroying electrical substations. Now, this got virtually no media pickup whatsoever, and US officials were basically tight-lipped about this. This was despite the Biden administration at the time talking up routinely the apparently grave threat of racially or ethnically motivated domestic terrorism in the US. And they published a dedicated national security strategy on how they were going to address this major problem. And then yet, when you have an actual example of this happening, they have nothing to say about that. We must ask ourselves, is that because if they were to openly talk about this, people might start making connections between Atomwaffen and Azov, which the US supports in Ukraine?
Right. So when Putin's saying denazification, he's literally talking about real Nazis on the eastern part of Ukraine. It's not a joke. Like some people, isn't bandied about much in the media here or alternate media, but the right, my study of the right, even leading up to my publication of my book, Global Death Cult, in 2021, they're always wanting to go get training. There were a couple guys associated with the base that went to Azov and came back to the U.S. and got arrested. So they always thought, even before the conflict started, in February 2022, people were going there routinely from the American far right and international far right, of my understanding. So it was like other far rightists from UK, etc.
Yeah, well, it's like, on that subject, the West Point Military Academy, which is this kind of elite US training military training center. They, in 2020, they published a report on Ukraine's attraction to neo-Nazis, and they noted that Kiev holds a particular attraction for white supremacist ideologues, explicitly due to Azov being state-backed, because Azov is the first example of an overtly state-affiliated neo-Nazi organization since World War II. Of course, throughout the Cold War, Britain and America supported neo-Nazi elements throughout Europe under the auspices of Operation Gladio, who carried out bank robberies, terrorist attacks, and other acts of extreme violence. But this was the very first time that they had openly that a state had openly endorsed a neo-Nazi faction. Now, it's also I also might add as well that the Christchurch spree shooter who killed 51 Muslims in New Zealand in 2019. His flak jacket, the flak jacket he was wearing while he carried out this horrific mass murder, it had Azov's logo on it, and his manifesto contains numerous references to Azov. So, and I might add that his manifesto was translated into Ukrainian and sold in book form in Ukraine. So it's like,
isn't the symbol of Azov? Isn't it a trident? It's a trident, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an old Nazi logo that they've kind of updated with some minor modifications, so they can say, oh, we're not neo-Nazi, but I mean they clearly are. And it's like I've written for the Grayzone about there's a group called Centuria, which advocates turning the governments and militaries of Western countries neo-Nazi, and its members have received training at elite military training centers in the US, Britain, and Canada. I mean, there was this one guy who was a Centuria fighter who graduated from Sandhurst, where like the creme de la creme of the British military are trained, and he was making for his YouTube channel daily videos on what's life is like at Sandhurst, but then every other video is about neo-Nazism. So I mean, it's not particularly a leap of logic to suggest that he was trying to inculcate his fellow trainees in the same kind of ideology. In terms of international connections, there have been several examples since the start of the proxy conflict of foreign fighters who from various European countries, including France, Italy, and Britain, being found in possession of ammunition and explosives and plotting mass casualty attacks. I believe it was July 2022. The British Parliament has an intelligence and security committee, which is supposedly meant to vet the operations offer some degree of oversight of the operations of MI5 and MI6. But even its own members admit that, well, they don't really tell us anything and we don't really know what they're doing. It issued a report in July 2022 where it stated that there is a significant risk of British citizens who have travelled overseas for extreme right-wing terrorism purposes in country redacted, having been further radicalised by their experience and developed connections with others who share their violent ideology. There are no prizes for guessing what country redacted is. And I might add that report rather ominously warned that there was no process in place to monitor these individuals upon their return from country redacted, in other words, Ukraine. And there is no indication that such a process has been implemented since. I have been warning for a very long time that there is a huge risk of neo-Nazi terrorism engulfing Europe once this conflict ends, which seems to be inching closer by the day. Already there are stab in the back myths circulating amongst Ukrainians within and without the country that we were betrayed by the West. Here in Serbia, I've had several conversations with. There's, I think it's almost 200,000 Ukrainian refugees that Serbia has taken in. I've had a number of conversations with people living here who very much believe that they were kind of led down the primrose path and then abandoned by Britain and America. And they are, to say the least, extremely angry about it. Now, Europol has warned. Europol being this Europe's continent-wide police force, that the war in Ukraine has been a huge shot in the arm to the black market trade in weapons, because you have these enormous arms shipments being sent to Ukraine, and then it's with very little oversight, and there is an enormous potential for this being skimmed off the top.
They've made it back to here. They've made it back here to the cartels in Mexico. So some of those American taxpayer dollars not only are being wasted in a futile, useless war, 7,000, 8,000 miles away, but it's made its way back. So people are skimming off tons of money. And there was a funny kind of interview between Shapiro and Zelensky recently, within the last couple of days. And Zelensky's just lying straight to his face. Oh, yeah, we've got receipts for everything. We can account for all the billions of dollars. And I'm just like, baloney. They just bought Princess Diana's dress for $2.5 million. Where'd that money come from?
Yeah, well, they've certainly got the receipts, but it's not for what they claim it's being spent.
Right, well said.
This is the thing. And I've frequently made allusions and comparisons with the proxy wars in the former Yugoslavia during the 1990s, where again you had an enormous amount of weaponry being sent to the US's Croatian and Bosniak proxy forces, and it was known that there was a quote-unquote transit tax, where between 20 to 50% of everything that was sent was being then taken and sold on the black market. And to this day, the Balkans remains, a key source for black market arms. Another aspect to this, again tying in with the threat of terrorist blowback, is, number one, the US and Britain, they smuggled into Bosnia Mujahideen fighters from all over the world, including Afghanistan. And they were fundamental to Bosnia's war effort. Now, when the Bosnian War finally ended in late 1995, under the terms of the peace settlement, which is known as the Dayton Agreement, Mujahideen fighters were required to leave Bosnia, and then immediately a hostile environment was created for them, in which their senior leadership were killed or deported, sent back to their countries of origin, where in several cases they were tried for very serious terrorism offences. Now, this greatly angered the Mujahideen's leadership, which included an individual named Osama bin Laden. And he then declared a jihad on America, and then you have the bombing of the USS Cole, the bombing of US embassies in East Africa as revenge for this. Now, several of the alleged 9/11 hijackers were veterans of the Bosnian War, and also the conflict in Chechnya, where, as I've written for the Grayzone recently, it seems that the hardline fundamentalist Islamic rebels in Chechnya were being run by the CIA. They were being funded by the same sources that funded the Bosnian Mujahideen. So, one way or another, supporting extremist factions in proxy wars in the former Yugoslavia leads to 9/11. Now,
weren't there Mujahideen troops that invaded Russia but they may have been supported by somewhere outside that. Weren't there attacks in Moscow or somewhere? If I remember.
Oh yeah.
Georgia.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like, yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, it's, yeah. This is the I mean, the irony of ironies is that the US has frequently denied offering any support whatsoever to the Chechen jihad whatsoever. But then recently, you had I say recently, I think it might have been last year. There was a prisoner exchange where you had that Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich released, and former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, and they were serving sentences for espionage in Russia. One of the people who was returned was this guy called Vadim Krasakov, who was convicted of killing a Chechen militant called Kangoshvili in Berlin in August 2019. Now, after the prisoner exchange, there was several sources in Georgia who openly stated that Kangoshvili was working for the CIA and was highly respected. So, I mean, that good as proves that the CIA did have a hand in the Chechen wars of the 90s and the 2000s. And I mean, these militants did things like they blew up apartment buildings, they carried out mass casualty bombings, they disappeared a large number of people. This is the danger of aligning with the most extreme elements on the ground in these conflicts, and there seems to be very little consideration for the consequences and blowback from this. A cynic might argue that this is this is deliberate, and I think that particularly given that the war in Ukraine has been absolutely ravaging for Europe, and you have a crisis of democratic legitimacy across the continent, where when the quote unquote wrong candidates win, elections get overturned, such as in Romania, or you have governments which are doing things which are explicitly contrary to the overwhelming majority of public opinion. I mean, if you look at polls, there is no country in Europe that wants to keep where there's a majority of people that wants to keep the Ukraine war going. But all governments are, particularly the British, are heavily wedded to keeping this going. Now, with mere hours before our interview commenced, you had a senior Russian general, Yaroslav Moskalik, who was killed in a car bomb attack in Moscow. And this is on the very day that Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, arrives in the Russian capital for peace talks.
He's not the first one to get bombed in Russia, too, right?
No. I was going to say as well that, I mean, in late 2022, and at the start of 2023, I reported on leaked documents related to the operations of a private spying firm called Anomaly 6. Now, Anomaly 6 has one of its key products is a spying technology that identifies individuals via their smartphones and can then track their movements down to the level of a building they're on and their quote unquote bed down location, which is to say where they sleep, their home. So I made the point at the time that I strongly suspect that Anomaly 6 was used, its technology was used to target Daria Dugin, who is the daughter of the Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin. And then you have there were two senior Russian officials there was an attempt to assassinate them in a restaurant in Donetsk. And again, we must wonder whether their phones were being tracked by Anomaly 6. You can find my reporting on the Grayzone website. And they offer numerous examples of how they managed to identify the smartphones of Russian intelligence and military officials. So
it's a new form of warfare. Like that's the whole thing about Kasap too. Is like I've never heard of anybody from the far right talking about drone warfare. Like that's crazy. But there is. I actually was on a show talking about the Order of Nine Angles for in Russia. So there's like Order of Nine Angles all over the place in Eastern Europe and Russia. People may not be aware of that.
Yeah. Well, it's also as well as that. Excuse me. It's also as well that I think that the far right is an international phenomenon. It's just not. It's very, very rarely talked about, and it's like you got to bear in mind that that many European countries which have market themselves internationally as being kind of peace-loving, pacifist, liberal, sleepy social democracies actually have massive far right movements. I mean, like Sweden has a huge, which provided shelter for people dodging the Americans dodging the draft of Vietnam. They have Europe's largest far right party. But this is never ever spoken about, and I think that the war in Ukraine has opened this Pandora's box because you have crazy things like Meta, the owner of Facebook, which previously banned any displays of the swastika, saying, well, because groups like Azov use this insignia, we're going to rescind our ban on it appearing on our platform. And it's like, well, I mean, what message does that send to the far right apart from our views are acceptable and mainstream now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's you're right. That's Pandora's box is it. Like things are going to spill out of control. Even if this conflict ends in Ukraine, if it does, there's still going to be tensions, training. People who came back from the front from Ukraine who are Nazis are now skilled in warfare, things like that. I mean, yeah. And the legends are going to be created too. Like I think Kasap, there was a legend being created. And the same kind of thing, it was a blowback if you like, they had a thing about Timothy McVeigh, however much you want to take that story, but he did go to the Iraqi war and then came back and was a right-wing terrorist. Whether he's an intel agent or not, it's another story. But
well, I mean that's a whole other can of worms. But I mean, we could do an entire episode about that.
For sure.
But I think, one of the is something at the moment which is quite interesting, which is the in Germany there are moves to ban the Alternative for Deutschland, which is this it is a anti-establishment party which does have leaders with a history of making kind of Nazi sympathetic statements, to put it mildly. Their supporters are just people who think that Germany is going, for the most part, are not possessed of such views. They just think that Germany is going the wrong way, and they are sick of Germany's established political parties who are not delivering for them. The last time that Germany attempted to ban a far right party was when, in the early 2000s, there was this party called the National Democrats. The Germany's High Court, which was overseeing which reviewed the government's request for it to be banned, concluded that it was so infiltrated by German intelligence that it was impossible to determine whether statements made by its leaders were encouraged by German intelligence and security services. Wow. It's just like that was the level of. That was the they found that pamphlets produced by the party had been written, which were advocating Holocaust denial, were written by German intelligence operatives. Wow. So it's
not much different than here in the States. I mean, Temple of Blood's been infiltrated. We had a huge guy who was proven to be an FBI informant for years. Suter was his name, or Sutter, and then the base, and we have this weird, mysterious Patriot Front that disappeared, and like weird marches that nobody, they're all way too clean cut. The average Nazi's a little bit of a, paunchy, unwell dressed, like frumpy dressed person, and all these guys are clean cut walking around. It's very strange, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have. I mean, of course, you have like the attempted Gretchen Whitmer kidnap, where it appears that like all but one of them was working for the FBI,
right?
Or so, like stuff like that. Like, but again, it's just like I think that's like. That's what makes the Kassak case all the more fascinating. I think that it's interesting, and maybe it was the Easter lull that knocked it off the headlines. But you have this blanket kind of mania by the mainstream media, it just really digging into him as this major threat, and there is like zero consideration of the undeniable and proven international connections that were seemingly pushing him to do what he was planning to do. It's
same as this guy right here, Ruth, that you include in your article. He's got Ukraine connections. Like, this is a very strange person. Tried to kill Trump in Florida, West Palm Beach, and like shows up in weird Black Rock videos. And is from Hawaii. Like, there's a Hawaii thing. He's flying all over the place. This is a strange guy.
Well, this is. I mean, I think with Ruth as well. And I mean, and this is the point I made in my piece as well. Is that what was interesting was that they acknowledged, because Ruth had been so loud about his support for Ukraine and how he was trying to rustle up foreign fighters to join the battle, and how he was there are suggestions that he might have been to Fort Bragg and all this other stuff, but like the media acknowledged this, but they were really desperately downplaying it, and they were saying he was delusional, that he was just this nobody who and whatnot. And it's like, well, I mean, quite clearly Kassak, he was a potentially mentally unwell teenager. But he certainly wasn't, he certainly wasn't a nobody.
He seemed to be moving on a plan. Like, he had a plan. He for people who don't know, the FBI had shown up at his house a year before for some other thing. So he was known, and this is another common theme here in the States. A lot of these people are known to the FBI, very suspicious. Then he clearly murders his mother and stepfather, waits 2 weeks, and then is moving towards Eureka, California for some reason. And I don't think that's ever been explained. And he was arrested in the middle of like Nowheresville in Kansas.
It was due to a routine traffic stop, I think. And then like he has a car full of money and guns, and it's just like I mean shades of Timothy McVeigh there, who is again routine traffic stop, and then has notes on him saying talking about how cheap dynamite is and how he can buy more of it and stuff.
That's actually a routine stop. A suspicious stop took place for Brandon Clint Russell when he was fleeing from Tampa after his associates got killed. It was a routine stop at at like a Taco Bell or something like that. The police thought they had interrupted a mass casualty event because he had so much, military stuff, and he really kind of got off light. He from his first brush with the law. But it's interesting how these guys get pulled over with tons of guns and
just completely randomly, of course. I mean, you have like Luigi Mancioni, who like allegedly it was, despite the fact that he was hooded, was recognized by a random McDonald's employee. I've just seen a pig flying. But
right.
But
weird. Do you know that Ruth and Mangione are both have domiciled in Oahu, of all places? Like they may have crossed paths. It's not a huge island. It's like 10 miles across or something like that. Like, it's amazing to think that they both kind of were there and then spread out. Mangione to New York, and I don't know if he's ever really. I mean, I guess he's had his own manifesto and statements. But like, why did he target this one guy, and how did he know where he was going to be?
Well, it's
it's 7 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I think that's another aspect of it as well. That, like, I saw the infamous video, and it's like, it looked like a professional hit. It's not something carried out by a 26-year-old with zero military experience and apparently like zero interest in guns. Prior, that it bearing in mind that he must have been tracking his movements for some time and apparently, wasn't noticed doing this. It's all very, very, very strange. But it's
Mangione wasn't like Ruth, who was kind of like not a very successful guy. Mangione was on the ascent to success, a successful financial and personal life. It's a very strange story, like why he turned all of a sudden. Because he was in AI. He was the head of his class at a exclusive private school here. He decides to throw it all away to kill some executive is very odd.
Yeah, it's like, again, that's the clear contrast with Kassab, who he just seems to have been it's a regular person from the middle of Nowheresville, and then he is just somehow seems to have been inculcated in the teachings of the Order of Nine Angles, which includes advocacy for sexual violence and paedophilia. And also as well, another very interesting aspect of this, which is somewhat unrelated, but might be a suspicious data point, is this is a guy who was planning out a quite elaborate scheme to kill Trump using a drone, and was in touch with people who allegedly were able to supply him with the requisite explosives, equipment, and also earmuffs, because he was going to be using a Magnum. It's not clear what the Magnum's for. And then in exchanges on TikTok, of all places, why you would use TikTok for anything apart from posting silly videos, I don't know. But he was asking someone, do you know any Order of Nine Angles Telegram groups? I can't find any. And it's like, right, so you're going to plot out this huge scheme, but you can't use a search function.
It's not that hard. I can find O9A YouTube channels easily. I don't know if there's odd similarities between this guy Kassab and Gendron, who shot up Buffalo. Are you familiar with that case?
No.
He drove up to Buffalo, but he was known to the FBI. He was known to have been communicating with some guy online, and he was radicalized online, and mentioned a lot of the names that you meant. Like Tarrant was the guy, the Christchurch shooter. So they all like Bowers, Dylan Roof, Tarrant, and all this white power stuff. But this guy had some kind of 764, which is an O9A offshoot. He had a 764 connection, which they overlooked too. But this is like somebody like Biden went out to mourn with the people who were shot. Total racist attack. But it's unclear why he drove all the way from the South in America to go to Buffalo to do the shooting. It's very strange movements.
Yeah. Well, that that would significantly raise the risk of you getting caught, wouldn't it?
10 fatalities.
Yeah. Well, it's also that was absolutely horrific. But if you look at so many, in terms of people being on the radar of the security and intelligence services when they carry out mass casualty attacks in the UK in 2017, I think it was May. And interestingly, it was just in advance of a general election, where a key theme of the government was that the Labour opposition were soft on terrorism. This individual called Hashim Abedi was this individual. What was his name? Salman Abedi, sorry, Hashim Abedi was his brother. He carried out this bombing that killed 22 people and injured over 1,000 at this Ariana Grande concert in an arena. And there was this official inquiry into the attack, which it noted that like they were these two quite young boys who actually had gone to fight in Libya against Gaddafi with MI5's assistance, it seems. MI5 being Britain's domestic security and intelligence service, like the FBI. They were doing things like, using credit cards to purchase stuff for the explosions, which, anyone who can tie their own shoelaces knows that you wouldn't do that because it's so easily traceable. They were very much on MI5's radar. They were under surveillance. They left a car for several weeks full of explosives, which was apparently illegally parked as well. But the police didn't think to, do anything and like look inside it or ask who this belongs to. And then there was this inquiry report offered all sorts of pseudo psychological rationalizations for why these two people did this, without mentioning the very obvious elephant in the room, which is they had gone to fight in a war as teenagers.
It's the same as the Boston bombings are very similar. Those two brothers, I can't remember their names right now, but they had they went back to the Caucasus and then radicalized. They had clearly some kind of intel thing before. So this is not uncommon. So this guy being, monitored by Ukrainian intel, and how much different is the Ukrainian intel than U.S. or coalition intel or whatever?
Well, it's not. I mean, this is another reason why. I do wonder whether there is very little doubt in my mind. It's within the margin of error that these were Ukrainian intelligence agents. I mean, you got to bear in mind that after the Maidan coup in 2014, the first thing that the kind of post-Maidan head of the SBU did was phone up the local American and British embassies saying, I want to speak to the CIA and MI6 right now. That was the first thing that he did.
They had a big New York Times article here. They just showed that the U.S. was assisting in these invasion in the Kursk region from Germany. So these guys they're hybrids. They're not independent. They're not as independent as a third party might think. I think so. Something weird might. Yeah. This. I mean, how much of a stretch is it to think that maybe the people who are in Ukraine right now are pissed at Trump for meddling in their gravy train, and this was maybe some means to kind of get back at him or have an attempt to influence American politics.
Well, I mean, it's like I wrote about this during the election campaign, which is that the British were giving unprecedented support to Kamala Harris, which is it's quite rare that you have British political consultants working on an American campaign, and I think that they were betting that she was going to keep the war going, and because of her general incompetence and ineptitude would be much easier to manipulate. You got to bear in mind that the basis of the Cold War was Truman, who was Harry S. Truman, who was a complete political novice, replaced FDR, who was very suspicious of the British. And the British managed to manipulate Truman into intervening in the Greek Civil War that the British were fighting at the time. And
everybody manipulated Truman, by the way. I think every decision he made was he's the reason why we have a CIA. He just and then he publicly renounced, I didn't know this was going to happen. Well, you should have. You done.
Well, what were you? Yeah, what were you thinking? Yeah, what were you thinking? Like, no, I think
I mean, he's so dense that he actually publicly admits that he had no idea what the consequences would be. Right? Like most people wouldn't make that public statement. Like, oh, I may have been played and clowned. I may have been.
Well, credit. I mean, credit to him for his honesty. I think because and it's interesting that he said that like in the immediate aftermath of Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah, he knew.
Yeah, of course. I mean, everyone knew, but it's like I think that he explicitly stated, well, my idea for the CIA would be an agency that would effectively produce a newspaper for the president based on information, and they could make decisions on that basis. And it's like, well, I mean, intelligence services have never operated like that. Never, but there we are.
There we are, and here we are, other intel doing scurrilous things, tampering with elections, international in scope, and possibly these occult groups as fronts, right? So, I mean, people have always argued. I've actually studied the O9A now for like maybe 6-7 years, and they always say, is this an intel front? It's really smart. Like whoever put together the core corpus of the O9A was a person of high intelligence or personages. So they've always speculated, like, how would somebody make this kind of like almost this software that could be spread out and go viral, which it has. It's really gone global. Like, how did somebody figure this out? And then, like, there's so much chaos and accelerationism, which this guy, that was his tag, by the way, was Kassam's tag was accelerationist, that are happening, all over the world now. It's there's something to be said. Are people taking advantage or people manipulating these poor, hapless people like who are Truman, who are naive, who are susceptible to manipulation? So
well, I mean, then of course you have Michael Aquino, who was this a psychological warfare specialist in the U.S. military, and then suddenly founded the Temple of Set, which was this satanic movement. Interesting, eh?
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, there's something to be studied there, and it gets really dark, like his involvement with the Franklin cover-up. According to other Walter Bowitz, I think the Search for a Manchurian Candidate has some stuff in there people would not even believe. Kit, we are at the hour mark. We're at 56 minutes. You've had some kind of interesting. There's a reason why you're in Belgrade, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd already moved here and fallen in love with the place. In no small part because of I was traveling around Eastern Europe and then got trapped in Serbia due to COVID. And all. But one of the reasons that this is home for me now, and I can't return to the UK, was the last time I flew in to London, my city of birth. There were 6 armed counter-terror police waiting for me on the tarmac, and who had I was then detained without any and interrogated without a right to silence, or under threat of arrest and prosecution for 6 hours on everything from how much I pay for my rent in Belgrade to whether the Grayzone has an agreement with Russian intelligence to publish leaked files, to which the obvious answer is no, that's complete and utter rubbish. But a deeply unpleasant experience, and I thought at the time, because there was a huge backlash against this. And I was interviewed by mainstream news networks, including The Hill, no less, which was quite wild. I thought that the backlash might deter British authorities from doing this again. But no, I mean, since I got hauled in, and I'm told that investigations into me are still ongoing, nearly 2 years later. We've had the detention of numerous dissidents, academics, journalists on terrorism, using terrorism laws. We've had the arrest of Richard Medhurst, who's a independent journalist. He has to surrender himself at Heathrow on May 1st. The repression is and suppression is just ramping up significantly. But this is the price you pay and the risk you run when you dare undermine mainstream narratives.
Right. Wow. I mean, there's Richard Medhurst. I've never heard his story before. Did you hear some weird story? I mean, you're as a guy from the UK. Is it true that Starmer was in some kind of homosexual romance with a lord? Is that real?
Oh, well, I mean, that's the speculation. I mean, Starmer's we could do a whole episode on this, but I mean, Starmer was a bagman for MI5 and MI6 and the CIA, it seems, and he was key to the cover up of Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile being this notorious paedophile,
necrophiliac guy was
necrophiliac, and this was something that the entire media knew and didn't say anything about. The Crown Prosecution Service, which oversees prosecutions, it had ample evidence of his crimes. It decided not to prosecute, and they destroyed all the evidence. Records of Starmer's contact with MI5 and MI6 when those agencies were being scrutinized by police for their involvement in extraordinary rendition and CIA torture. They've all been destroyed. MI5, MI6 got off the hook, despite the fact the police had thousands of pages of documents, including MI6 memos where they're talking about torture of particular named people. It would be entirely unsurprising to me if that story was true.
It's authentic.
Was authentic because he's clearly a extremely shady and establishment protected figure, and I think that the details are that he seems to spend a lot of time with this member of the House of Lords and not his wife. So
it really is true. Like he's hanging out with this guy too. Wow, who's a known homosexual? Like he's an open homosexual. I don't think. Right? Have you ever seen a picture of a youthful looking kid that looks like Starmer with Savile?
I did see. I did see
I'll
someone
post
suggest
that again. I've had nobody is able to confirm that 12-year-old kid who looks like a youthful Starmer is Starmer with Savile, which would really be something else.
That would be crazy.
I don't know, but it looks like him.
It certainly does.
Strange days of high level corruption, warfare, censorship, oppression. Even here in the States, weird things like calling for censorship for anti-Semitism, which is very subjective and really concentrating on that. They're kicking people out of the country for protesting the genocide, which is obvious to somebody on the other side of the universe. They're killing these poor people and children in Gaza. So it's like they don't want people to talk about the obvious. It's really odd. It's not good, especially, the U.S. prides itself on its Bill of Rights, or used to pride itself, I should say. So it's kind of weird to see people tolerating that. The tolerance of this is you got to wonder what's going on with the American public. Your country's always been a little different. You've always had the crown influences things much more so, don't you think?
Oh yeah, well, it's there's all. It's interesting that they refer the body that prints money and produces coins is called the Royal Mint, but they talk about the national debt. The ministers have to swear an oath of allegiance to the king or queen, whoever's in power at the time, and also as well, I think that there are zero free speech protections. I mean, you mentioned in the US that's being eroded, but I mean in the UK, I mean it's that they are openly moving to like criminalize all sorts of all sorts of expressions of solidarity with Palestine, like including logos. Like the red triangle that the Palestinian freedom fighters use. That's potentially going to be legalized. People have been arrested for wearing badges with parachutes because that's a reference to how Hamas. Yeah. So it's just, I mean, I think if there's a positive in this, it's that repressive power structures are always the most repressive when they're on the verge of collapse. It's just a shame that we have to live through the hyper repressive part to get out the other side. But that day will hopefully come.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I guess there's, like you said, you're busy. There's so many things happening all over the world. It's really a remarkable time to be alive to see all this stuff, like even in the UK. And this is kind of one of those weird events. This guy, Nikita Kasab, influenced by somebody in Intel, clear connections in the FBI documents that he's talking to. Kit, where can people find your work and where can people reach out to you?
Sure. So you can drop me an email at kitklarenberg@protonmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter. That's Kit Klarenberg. You won't be able to find my account using search engines. My website, likewise, kitklarenberg.com. That's nowhere to be found on Google, but you can like, share, subscribe. My content is free, but if you're feeling generous, you can buy me a coffee or two. And I am the editor of Grayzone UK, where most of my major investigations come out. So hopefully see you there. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's great to talk with you again. It's been too long, and it's Kit Klarenberg, and I will put links to his Grayzone and his website in the show notes. And we covered Nikita Kasab and this did the Ukrainian intel attempt to Trump assassination. Thanks so much for your time.
God bless you. Take care.
God bless you too. Stay there. Stay there. Stay there.